Chapter 21. Using an armament. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. It's not an overwhelming talent like a system user. But it's still better than most. I can work around with that. Compass Carburetor thought as he clenched his fist, feeling the faint energy flowing within. He then looked at the Queen, Ephemelia. How do we harness this energy? We cannot use Darlac naturally. Ephemelia said, the only way we can harness it is through the help of a Darble. She then began to walk away, beckoning for Compass Carburetor to follow her. They then reached another room, an armory of sorts where numerous cylindrical instruments were stored on shelves. Ephemelia took a cylindrical object, saying, we call this an armament. The lengths of armaments vary, but that is only to facilitate better grip for people with different sized hands. She activated it, causing energy to appear from one flat surface of the cylinder, forming a sword in an instant. The sword was around a meter in length and had a breadth of 3 centimeters. She lightly swung it once, saying, the primary advantage of this is that there is no weight to these weapons. So, you can wield them without any muscle strain for longer durations than wielding a conventional weapon. But, the power behind an attack is also inclusive of the weapon's weight, right? Compass Carburetor asked in confusion. Yes, that is true. Ephemelia nodded, we cannot give any weight to these energy weapons. But, they are sturdy and instantly reparable when damaged. And, you can subsist the force required using your muscular force. As long as the blade is sharp enough, it would cut better than a normal sword. That is true, Compass Carburetor nodded, asking, so, can you alter the shape and size of the weapon as you deem fit? That's unfortunately not possible. Ephemelia shook her head, the Darlac in your body only acts as a source to power the armament. You aren't controlling it. So, you can't change their shape. But, she smiled, making the breadth of the energy sword increase by 10 times in an instant, you can install certain states into an armament. She showed the armament to him. There are 2 states in this armament, a thin sword, and a wide sword. Normally, you can condense anything among the 2. But typically, we use the thin sword, and once we plunge it into a foe, we change it into a wide sword. This way, it will cut further through their body, killing them. We also use the wide sword as a shield sometimes. It's the most efficient design. She took out another armament, condensing a sword first before condensing a shield. Compass Carburetor noticed that the shape of the sword and the shield was too different. The wielder would have to change stances to use them correctly. Ephemelia spoke, in this armament, the 2 states cannot be used simultaneously for a greater effect. There's a sword and there's a shield. Both have their respective roles. That's it. That's why, when we install different states in an armament, we ensure that they have a base design and the variations entire shrink or grow from that. This way, you can simply switch states while in battle without having to alter your stances. How many states can you install in an armament? Compass Carburetor asked. In the ones we can produce, you can install 3 states. Ephemelia said, the royalty of Heroica Empire has armaments with 4 states. Though, you can simply carry a second armament with you. You have 2 hands after all. Hearing her choice of words, Compass Carburetor asked, are we only able to power them through our palms? Yes, she nodded, that's why they are designed in such a manner. Compass Carburetor grabbed an armament, concentrating on it as he held it steadily, soon able to sense 2 clusters of energy within. And, both of them pricked a part of his hand each, forming goosebumps on the respective places. That's your cue. Focus on the places that got pricked, and you'll be able to activate and vary the states. Ephemelia said. Nodding, Compass Carburetor focused on the back of his wrist that pricked, immediately feeling as if something belonging to him was sucked out, almost making him lose consciousness in the process. He opened his eyes, gazing at the energy blade before him. It lacked any weight, but he could see that it was immensely sharp, making him feel like he could cut through anything with it. But, just as he admired it, the energy blade flickered before dissipating. Immediately, an intense sense of exhaustion seeped through him as Compass Carburetor plopped on the ground, panting as if he had sprinted for a kilometer at his top speed. "That's normal for your first time," Ephemelia said. "Once you eat and supply your body with energy, it would produce some Darlac. Keep training until you are exhausted, eat your fill, and recover your Darlac. Continue in this cycle, and your reserve of Darlac will continue to increase." She took out a normal-looking armament and gave it to him. "This is the most basic armament. It condenses a 10 cm long knife. And we use this to quantize and measure our stamina. Every 1 minute you can keep it materialized equals to 1 Darlac. The longer you can keep it materialized, the greater your power." She then smiled. "Every soldier has a minimum of 30 Darlac. Below that, and they are simply called trainees. Keep training non-stop to increase your reserves of Darlac. Once you cross 30 Darlac, I'll gift you a custom-made armament with 3 states to help in your mission." Nodding, Compass Carburetor got up, feeling that his legs were a bit wobbly. He used his superior senses to balance his body, ensuring he wouldn't trip as he firmed himself. Seeing his actions, Ephemelia was surprised. Most wouldn't even be able to stand up for a good 1 hour. "As I thought, his body is exceptionally trained." She then beckoned for him to follow her as they left the room, heading towards another. Along the way, Compass Carburetor looked around, noticing that they were far away from any guards that could listen in on their conversation, leaning towards the queen a little as he whispered, "I'm curious. As the strongest in this kingdom, how much Darlac do you have?" Ephemelia smiled in response, "That's a national secret." Chapter 22. Puppets. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. It was a room larger than the previous one. And it consisted of humanoid puppets, mostly made of wood while some were made of iron. There were hundreds in the place. Upon seeing them standing prim and proper, swords and blades in hand, Compass Carburetor flinched once, afraid they would spring upon him at once. The queen, Ephemelia, smiled upon seeing his response, saying as she pointed at the wooden puppet at the front, "And, this is the second power that we use. Puppets. Unlike armaments, we can freely control puppets as we wish. And, it's like having disposable units under you to serve your every need. So, every puppeteer is valuable because we can raise an army with them and win battles without suffering any loss in lives." "Do they function using Darlac too?" Compass Carburetor asked, hesitantly touching a wooden puppet, feeling that the wood used was smooth, having a heavy feeling to it. "Yes, you need Darlac to manipulate them. The greater the actions they take, the more your Darlac is consumed," the queen said, "and, the farther they are away from you, the greater the Darlac you have to expend to control them." "How far can an average puppeteer reach?" Compass Carburetor asked. "Around 30 meters, the queen said. "Beyond that, the expenditure is too great to even sustain a normal sprint. So, most of them don't send their puppets that far away." She then thought for a moment before saying, "And, your expenditure depends on your affinity to the craft. With a lower affinity, you would need to expend a greater deal of energy simply to make the puppet execute basic commands. With higher affinity, you can move the puppet just like you can do your body, sometimes even better." "How do I try it?" Compass Carburetor was raring to go, wondering how he would fare. "Not yet," Ephemelia shook her head, "I was just showing the puppets to you today. You need to have at least 1 Darlac before you can attempt to even move one of its limbs. Otherwise, you won't even realize if you moved it because your Darlac would be completely pulled out, leaving you in an exhausted state. So, you won't be able to concentrate enough." "Fair enough," Compass Carburetor nodded, asking as he looked around, "I can see that not all of them are wooden puppets. How are they made?" "Well," Ephemelia tapped her chin, thinking as she spoke, "the primary material for both an armament and a puppet is Darble. In an armament, the percentage of Darble forming the armament dictates the number of states it can hold. It can have 1 state at a Darble purity of 20%, increasing by 1 for every 20% increase in purity. And at a 100% purity, it can have 5 states. As for a puppet, it's slightly different, Ephemelia said. In a puppet, there exists a core made from darble, positioned around the same place as our hearts. And, nerves of darble traverse through its limbs. So, when we maintain it, the darlak from our bodies flows into the air like a river and gushes into the puppet's core, powering it up. It then moves according to our wishes. The material can be anything, she said, but, if the material used doesn't have much affinity to darble itself, then the puppet wouldn't move as fast as we would like it to move. Thankfully, some materials have a high affinity to darble. The delay in movements while using the puppets created from such materials is very little. Woody wood is the most common material used in the wooden puppets, she said, knocking the wooden puppet next to him. There are some plantations in the kingdom that grow this wood. Woody wood puppets weigh around 45.50 kilograms. So, they are strong. Compass Carburetor thought, so, the power they exhibit is based on their weight class. The Queen's eyes widened as she looked at him, for a moment sweating internally. He quickly figured out the essence of this principle. Thankfully, such a figure is my ally. Just what kind of life had he led till now? Even though he's like a child in terms of fighting, it feels like he's not a human child, but a dragon child that is only waiting to mature. She instantly reoriented her emotions, appearing normal as she nodded. Indeed, as they are puppets, we can move them as we wish. And, the heavier they are, the stronger their attacks become. Even though the darlak expenditure also increases with an increase in the weight of the puppet, we usually have puppets with different densities. Each of them has their respective function. Just like an armament, there are divisions among puppets too. And, we typically classify them into 3. Wooden puppets, iron puppets, and darble puppets. She pointed at the far end of the room where there were iron puppets. Wooden puppets are cheap to create. They are the cheapest of the lot. So, all the puppeteers only use wooden puppets. As for iron puppets, the raw materials themselves are scarce. And, creating them requires tremendous investment, time, and labor. So, she sighed, creating iron puppets is difficult. Even the royal treasury only has 10 iron puppets in total, and 5 of them are for my personal use. This is precisely because the material we use to create an iron puppet, strand iron, is hard to come by. A human-sized iron puppet created from strand iron weighs around 520.570 kilograms. And, they are ridiculously tough, so the power they can exhibit is unmatched. Most armament swords barely manage to leave a scratch on them. She said. So, puppeteers are the strongest here. If you have 100 of such puppets, you can even destroy a kingdom alone. Compass Carburetor frowned, thinking that the power scale was kind of wonky. He felt like the armaments were too weak in comparison to the puppets, even though they were employing the same energy, darlak. Most puppeteers can only control a single puppet. Ephemelia smiled wryly. General Artica, the strongest general of my kingdom, only controls 3 iron puppets. And as for me, I only control 5 iron puppets. No matter how strong an iron puppet is, it becomes useless the moment I have no darlak to move it. Chapter 23. To face a plot armor. You are listening at novelfull.audio. So, they indeed have limitations. Compass Carburetor nodded, asking when he noticed that all the puppets were humanoid, is it not possible to create puppets with other shapes? It is possible, Ephemelia nodded, but, every design requires the inlaying of complex darble circuits within the puppet. And, doing that would mean we have to invest tremendous manpower and research into it. And even then, the puppet may not fare as well as a humanoid puppet. Humans have the most versatility, she said. We can wield any object thanks to our flexible fingers. Our legs are strong, so the puppets created after us have our advantages without the exhaustion we face. Right as she said it, numerous images flashed through Compass Carburetor's mind as thoughts flickered in his head. Right, suppose there is a puppet in the shape of a tiger. Even though it can serve as a mount, run at tremendous speeds, and use its powerful teeth to hunt, it cannot use its limbs to attack without losing balance. But, a human puppet can attack using the hands and legs and adapt accordingly. And best of all, we have the personal experience of moving our bodies. So, we can easily manipulate the puppet based on our experience to achieve the utmost efficiency. Right, the puppets can also wield swords and shields. So, they are better. Compass Carburetor nodded, then asking a question that caused Ephemelia to mentally flinch once. So, are they able to wield an armament too? They can, Ephemelia sighed, but the Darlac expenditure would be too much. There would be a loss based on your affinity to the puppet craft. And then, it would face another loss based on your affinity to the armament craft. Wielding an armament using a puppet is more energy-draining than wielding an armament yourself. Understood, Compass Carburetor didn't ask about Darbal puppets, as it seemed the Queen was unwilling to continue further on the topic. I have asked plenty enough already. I'll first digest this information and experiment myself first before clarifying my doubts with her. He then gave a formal bow. Thank you for giving me all this information. I'll be training now. Please tell me everything Regriel does daily so that I can prepare myself accordingly. Alright, I'll keep you posted on everything. Ephemelia said, exiting the room along with him as she turned around. If you need anything else, you can ask the servants. I'll post 2 of them to remain in your service throughout the day. Thank you. Compass Carburetor bowed formally as he returned to his room, carrying the basic armament with him. He noticed the 2 servants standing at his room's entrance, instructing them, please send me meals 6 times per day at equal intervals from today onwards. Yes, the servants bowed as one of them walked away, soon returning with a plate of dishes. Compass Carburetor gorged through them quickly, watching the servants exit the room as he closed his eyes, sleeping, feeling his body's state of exhaustion as he thought, 1 hour should be enough. Exactly an hour later, he woke up, feeling refreshed. Health, level 10. Natural recovery, level 6. Resting, level 10. These 3 skills that were part of his physique allowed him to have a rest whenever he wished and wake up shortly after, feeling refreshed. After working non-stop for 21 hours, Compass Carburetor only required 3 hours of sleep to feel perfectly fresh once he woke up. He won't feel any fatigue, both physically and mentally. This was the advantage of his physique-related skills. Compass Carburetor then patted his stomach, noticing that he had digested part of the food already, thinking in regret, if only I obtained the body-related skills from the money-making system. At level 7, it would have awakened food-related skills. That would have made my situation even better. Still, this is good. He thought, feeling the energy in his body had become a tad denser. But, he didn't practice yet, opening the door as he looked at the servant, I need a simple item. He then gave its description, detailing it quickly. After listening to it, the servant nodded, we should have the materials lying around. We'll make the item and return immediately. As she left, Compass Carburetor sat on his bed in a meditative pose, closing his eyes as he focused on the energy in his body. It feels like water, but slightly colder. And it has mixed into my blood and is being transported through it. So, the stronger my heart is, and the more vigorous its pumping is, the Darlac I can output would be equally higher. If possible, I should learn this craft so that I can create items accordingly to the situations. He thought, eradicating the thought process as he simply focused on the Darlac in his body, familiarizing himself with the sensation, silently observing it. It was similar to how when a person meditated, they would soon hear the sounds of their heartbeat and experience the mild flow of blood through the blood vessels. They would also hear and feel the actions taken by the various organs in their body, the mild twitching of the various muscles, etc. It required one to meditate in a silent place, free from all distractions and thoughts, focusing entirely on themselves. When he was young, it was impossible for him to be seated for more than a minute before feeling restless or bored. But as his mentality was affected by the system, he had changed, turning into a completely different character from his youth. He learned patience, gentleness, and focus. And now, he was applying that to understand Darlak better. As it was something unfamiliar to him, having grown up on Earth where such energies were only part of fiction, there was an instinctive rejection stemming from his body against the unknown. It was part fear of the unknown and his body's unwillingness to accept change. And, this stemmed from his 35 years' worth of life on Earth. It wasn't something easy to get rid of. But, he had to do that and wholeheartedly accept Darlak. Only in that way would he be able to assimilate it into him faster and grow stronger than Regreel that relied on the system to grow and obtain strong companions one after another. To face a plot armor, I have to break the fourth wall first. Chapter 24. Skipping. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Around 30 minutes after he began his meditation, the servant arrived, bringing in a skipping rope. It was what he had requested her to make. All it needed was 2 wooden handles and a heavy rope. He made the rope heavy to train his wrist. And as for the handles, he asked them to be shaped just like an armament. He had done this simply for one reason. To get accustomed to the weight of the armaments and increase the strength in his wrist, especially its capability to exert force while rotating. And, what best way to train it other than skipping? Compass Carburetor intended to increase the weight of the rope and the handles later once he got used to the current weight. Grabbing the skipping rope, he began to skip. At the start, his jumps were as high as 10 centimeters. He made mistakes too, ones that caused him to flinch when the rope hit his feet. But, he was only skipping slowly now, to avoid serious injuries. He had only skipped when he was a child, so he had lost touch completely with the sport. And now, as he continued to practice, he got the hang of it soon enough. His improved physique and his exceptional control over it helped immensely. Cognition, level 9. 5 senses, level 10. Dexterity, level 8. Dexterity to move his hands and feet accurately, 5 senses to feel every action he did at greater precision and clarity, and cognition to understand and absorb the experience and grow spontaneously. They worked in a cycle, bolstering each other to create a synergic effect that allowed him to master the craft within a couple of hours. As it was something he had done in childhood and was just one exercise that he had to repeat in a loop, Compass Carburetor got the hang of the rhythm soon after. Now, the gap between his jumps and the ground was only wide enough for the rope to pass through. And, as he continued to do it, his speed increased as soon, only the whistling sounds of the skipping rope cutting through the air resounded, creating a tune that was rather pleasant to the ears. For the next 2 hours, he skipped non-stop, finally arriving at a halt as he was drenched with sweat, feeling tired. He still had enough stamina to skip for another 2 hours, but decided otherwise for the time being. He then felt his stomach, feeling a mild hunger. Good, the food's fully digested. He could feel the Darlak in his body was slightly more now. It's not enough. My body's not accustomed to producing Darlak yet. I first have to achieve it so that my body would be able to easily convert the energy from the food into Darlak. I have to assimilate with it even more. Compass Carburetor held the basic armament in his hand, closing his eyes as he felt a prickling sensation on the back of his hand. It was the trigger for activating the only state in the armament. As he focused on the part where it pricked, he could feel the armament unleashing a suction force that tugged at his Darlak. As the Darlak continued to be pumped through his blood, it was influenced by the suction pull. Once the Darlak arrived at his heart, instead of proceeding about through the numerous arteries, all of it only passed through the artery heading towards his right hand. Once it reached the end of the hand, splitting through the numerous blood vessels, the Darlak exited through the pores on his palm, flowing into the basic armament. The armament absorbed the Darlak and condensed a knife on its front. Compass Carburetor felt as if his entire being was getting sucked into the armament. But, before he could orient his thoughts or get used to the sensation, the knife flickered before vanishing. Panting, he thought, I think I lasted around 4-5 seconds this time. He slumped on the bed, panting as he felt his vision blurring, at times failing to register what he saw in his brain. Shaking his head, he panted, taking in a deep breath as he could feel his clarity of vision returning. But, he was still exhausted. Unwilling to waste his time, Compass Carburetor got up, grabbed his skipping rope and began to skip non-stop once again, starting slow as he soon returned to his top speed, noticing his vision firming while the hunger in his stomach continued to increase before rumbling. After an hour of skipping, he stopped, placing the skipping rope as he opened the room's door, looking at the servant as he asked for food to be brought in and some change of clothes. "Bring me lots please. I'll be training many times per day from now on." Yes, the servant did as she was told. Once she brought in another set of clothes, Compass Carburetor took a bath and changed into the new set of clothes, eating the food that arrived right on time. Right after eating, he looked at the time on his watch. "I'll repeat in cycles of 4 hours. 3 hours of skipping, 30 minutes of meditation, less than a minute to maintain the armament's activation, and the reminder time to eat and take a bath. I'll modify my schedule once the armament's activation duration increases beyond 20 minutes. Compass Carburetor slept on the bed, closing his eyes as he immediately fell asleep. 3 hours of sleep was enough for him per day. But now that using Darlac exhausted him even deeper, he resorted to this plan. By splitting his sleep into multiple batches, he was getting 6 hours of sleep in total. But, this also meant he was able to train fully fresh 6 times every day. His sleeping efficiency was high, rather, it was higher than what he had accounted for. After all, he woke up within 40 minutes after sleeping, feeling completely fresh. Laughing, Compass Carburetor got up and began to skip, training his wrists to get used to the action while making his legs more spring-like. He realized that making his legs have more springing power would only be beneficial in the long run. So, he might as well do that since the action of skipping trained the respective muscles anyway. Chapter 25. Have fun to grow stronger, faster. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. By the end of the 3rd day of this training routine, Compass Carburetor smiled. "It's done. I have 1 Darlac now." He smiled, watching the knife flicker and vanish only after 60 seconds had passed. He felt dizzy once his Darlac reserves were emptied. But Compass Carburetor didn't allow that to stop him, resting as he closed his eyes and quickly regulated his breathing, watching his vision clear up. Smiling, he continued to skip for another minute. After taking a bath, and having his food, Compass Carburetor slept for 40 minutes, getting up as he patted his stomach, meditating as he could feel the digesting juices in his stomach acting upon the food. The resultant energy produced once the process was complete was absorbed into his blood as nutrients. And, as this blood was supplied into every organ and muscle, they absorbed the nutrients and released a faint amount of Darlac. The Darlac was soluble in the blood, mixing with it before traveling through the bloodstream. As they continued to flow, more organs and muscles released Darlac into the blood, increasing its concentration. And, as the Darlac was also supplied to the organs, the cells in them drank up the energy, processing it as they changed faintly. And when they produced Darlac, the quantity was an infinitesimally small component greater than the intake amount. And when the same process was repeated through the entire body, the quantity of Darlac being produced was significant. As its quantity increased, Compass Carburetor smiled. "Even if my talent and affinity to Darlac isn't the highest, I have a strong body to process it. My body is on the level of Olympic athletes from multiple sports mixed into one. And as compared to the residents of this world, I am able to train 3 to 4 times as much as them every day. And, I can keep this up without any exhaustion or injury from heavy training. This is my actual talent now." Compass Carburetor meditated, understanding more and more about Darlac every time he meditated. As he also experienced the changes it brought to his body, he was able to determine the attribute of this energy. It's a form of energy similar to electricity. And, the conditions to wield it relies upon the Darbal. Otherwise, this Darlac flows through my body just like how electricity flows through my nerves. Without an object to harness them, they just exist there, doing their set functions. The electricity in the nerves is used to contract and expand the muscle strands. As for Darlak, it's able to improve my stamina. That's its only use. Compass Carburetor thought. Once he felt his body was brimming with Darlak, Compass Carburetor continued to skip non-stop, noticing that he wasn't feeling that much tired as he usually did at the end of 2 hours. There was a mild improvement in his stamina. Though, he realized that this wasn't his stamina improving. His stamina had remained the same. It was only the Darlak that was subsisting. His body's energy needs to function more. It's a basic form of energy that's like an extraction of stamina. Darlak isn't some mystical energy that's beyond comprehension. Even on Earth, once we had researched further, we would have figured out the method to harness it. This world only achieved it easily since the Darbal readily exists to awaken one. So, I don't need anything special to harness it. As he understood the essence of Darlak, his body's resistance towards it continued to decrease. It was because he was instilling in his body that Darlak was something that always existed in his body. But, it couldn't be extracted and used individually before, just like how it wasn't possible to extract electricity from the neurons. Upon arriving at this thought process, Compass Carburetor smiled. Next, all he did was mentally brainwash himself, telling himself repeatedly that Darlak was something that was naturally his, a part of his body. And as the days passed, he could feel that his body was indeed reacting better to Darlak. The quantity being produced in his body after his meals continued to increase. I can still do more. I haven't even drawn closer to my body's limit. A week after he started training, Compass Carburetor had already accumulated 3 Darlak. Seated in her private chamber, the queen, Ephemelia, stared at her 2 daughters playing around with armaments. Their armaments were different from the rest. After all, it didn't create blades to hack things upon activating. All it created was cylindrical rods that were blunt. As her 2 daughters were twins and were only 6 years old, she just made them armaments that acted as toys for them. This way, their training could be achieved as they played. As children love to play the most, she used her wealth to create numerous armaments that created various toys for them to play with. And just like her, her daughters too were able to wield both an armament and a puppet. So, she created cute humanoid puppets for them to manipulate and play with. Once they tired themselves out, they fell asleep. And, since they were constantly hungry, they ate lots after waking up. After putting up with some lessons she taught them, they continued to play with their toys. As she saw them play, Ephemelia smiled, "Play to your heart's content. You'll grow stronger as a result, stronger than a child that was forced to train from young." Everything varied based on the method used to handle the situation. She knew how she was when she was a child. So, she was well aware of what her children wanted, giving them exactly that. But, she also used it to teach them, making them have fun while growing stronger. There's a way to deal with everything. She thought, worrying for a moment as she thought about General Artika. "I hope you aren't too much mentally scarred by this." "I'll save you soon, please wait, Artika." Ephemelia closed her eyes, linking her vision to one of her puppets, sharing sight with it as she looked into a room, watching the figure of Compass Carburetor engrossed in his training. Upon seeing the childlike glint in his eyes as he watched the armament condense the knife every single time, she couldn't help but laugh. Right, you can only grow the fastest when you have fun with what you are doing. Laughing, she grabbed a skipping rope, a replica to what the servants had made for Compass Carburetor. Is this really that effective? Chapter 26. Wait, Dungeons. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Is this really that effective? Ephemelia thought as she followed what Compass Carburetor did, struggling at the start as she winced in pain every time the rope lashed on her legs. She was also struggling to balance herself correctly because of the weight on her chest dragging her down. I need to wear an armor. She frowned, quickly wearing one from her dressing room. As she moved, hopping a little, she nodded, "My chest weight doesn't hinder me too much now." She then began to skip, slowly getting a hang of the action as she spent more than 6 hours at a stretch on it. Soon, she was getting used to it when she thought, I can see why he's doing this non-stop. It makes my legs more spring-like and is also strengthening my wrists further. It is indeed necessary to wield an armament. Is this a training method used in Platopia? She thought, smiling as she felt it was the right decision to have taught him about their powers. I can feel like this would allow me to grow even stronger. Due to her enormous reserve of Darlak, she wasn't even sweating after exercising for so long. She then muttered, even though this is beneficial, it only works the most at the start. For my level, the intensity isn't enough. The Darlak in her body began to be expended at a faster pace as her 5 iron puppets arrived forward, grabbing a skipping rope each. Then, they too followed her actions, beginning to skip one after another. It was Ephemelia controlling all 5 at the same time. Now, her Darlak was getting expended at a faster pace while making all her 5 iron puppets repeat the same action as her allowed her to clearly determine the differences in her body in the iron puppets, bolstering her understanding of them even further. Seated in his room, Compass Carburetor frowned, thinking of something. For some reason, I can feel that the Queen's trust in me has increased over the days. Normally, it is impossible to read her emotions. But when General Artica is mentioned, she isn't able to maintain her cool completely. And in that state, I'm able to judge her emotional state better. And after every day, she indeed seems like she trusts me more and more. Has she been using the truth serum on me? When she noticed that I didn't even sense anything strange, she realized that I wasn't hiding anything. Was that why she's opening up to me more? He thought, feeling that might very well be the case. As he didn't have any animosity towards her, he was fine with it. Moreover, it was through her that he received tremendous help and information. It really made him regard himself for not trying to escape from the palace once he arrived in this world. If he had done that, he would have to struggle to earn money, obtain information little by little, spend all he earned on his food expenses and work even harder to obtain enough money for his other basic needs. He would then need to find a way to awaken himself to Darlak and work his way up. Everything needed him to spend too much time and effort for minimal gains. But by the time he did that, Rigriel would have gotten accustomed to his powers and would have begun to grow at a tremendous pace. It would be too late to face him by then. At present, Rigriel was a fat man without any talents. He wasn't even able to carry his own weight. He was as useless can be. But with time, the system would modify him, starting with his physique. He would start to train himself while the system would give him rewards from time to motivate him. And by motivation, it was mostly hatred. Through mysterious coincidences, or by directing Rigriel to act in a certain manner, it would make him attract the animosity of other males. After all, as a fat stump of uselessness, he was accompanied by powerful pretty women. So, any male would feel jealousy. And upon noticing how incompetent he was, they would make a move on him. While suffering losses through each encounter, his pride would be wounded. The humiliation would force him to work harder. And in such a manner, he would train and work hard in bettering himself. And, the system would put him in a fast track of progress. The results that a person would have obtained with 8.10 years of training would be given to him within a year, or even shorter depending on how the system planned for his fate to play out. No matter what, 1 year. If I fail to kill Rigriel before then, I can stop dreaming about obtaining system fragments from him. He would have become too strong for me to face alone by then. Compass Carburetor thought, thankfully, I have the Queen by my side now. She needs General Artica. And to free her, Rigriel has to be killed. Our goals align, so, she'll provide me tremendous help. Thanks to her, I can blindly train non-stop and improve my abilities. The food she's providing me is also highly nutritious to the extent I feel like I would fatten up if I stopped training. Thanks to her, I can continue growing at tremendous speeds. He clenched his hand into a fist, feeling the faint Darlak flowing through his body. He then sat in his study, pulling up the documents the servants had given him. Upon looking at them, he sighed, even though I don't know the words, their meaning is automatically translated into my head. It was a journal detailing everything Rigriel had experienced for the past week, depicted to the finest details. It seemed the Queen indeed had competent spies, judging by how they were even able to record all the conversations shared between Rigriel and General Artica. Rigriel hasn't done much. Everything is being done by General Artica. They arrived at Pekel City on the same night as Rigriel's supposed execution. General Artica ambushed some thugs to steal the money on them. Using that, she booked a room for their stay. On the next day, she entered the Pekel dungeon to hunt monsters and obtain more funds. Wait, dungeons. Chapter 27. Pekel City. You are listening at novelfull.audio. We arrived at Pekel City, General Artica said as she jumped on the ground, looking at the walled city far away to her front. How will we enter the city? Rigriel panted as he lay on the snow. The two iron puppets carrying him had dropped him on the ground for him to rest. In his current physical state, he wasn't even fit enough to travel far in a comfy carriage, not to mention on the arms of the iron puppets. General Artica panted, gasping for breath as she was exhausted. They had basically run all the way from the border to the city. And she was controlling her 3 iron puppets to do that, not to mention carrying herself and the heavy weight Rigriel. So, it took a great toll on her. She then gazed up at the evening sky, looking at the snow that was falling, turning around to see that the footprints of her 3 iron puppets were already being covered. We cannot bring these puppets into the city. Why? Rigriel was confused. Wouldn't no one trouble us after seeing our power? General Artica twisted his ears, causing him to squeal in pain as she said in anger, these are freaking iron puppets. And there are 3 of them. Anyone who has them is a general, even in Heroica Empire. We'll be attracting attention from all sides once we saunter with them. Do you even have a brain to ask such a question, dear? Sorry, Rigriel bowed his head in shame. He suddenly felt that he was turned on, stealing glances at General Artica to notice that she was looking around in tension, trying to find an appropriate place to bury the iron puppets for safety. Not now, not now. Once we enter the city, we can do it again. Besides, I can't even get up. Fuck this sh*t, if only I wasn't this weak, I could have been inside her for longer. 3 seconds. Pathetic. She looked at me like an insect for only lasting that long. Rigriel wallowed up in regret when he was excited to hear the system resound in his mind once again. Ding. Generating quest. Find a place to stay for the night, quest. The night is cold, and it is freezing on top of that. Staying outside would weaken the exhausted General Artica even further. Find an inn to stay in for the night. Time limit. 1 hour, Dovco reward. Body resurgence, level 1, failure. General Artica would be disappointed in you. There's a 30% chance the bond between you might break. Fuck. I can't fail this. Rigriel thought immediately as he said, let's bury the iron puppets under a tree after uprooting it. The snow would bury all traces anyway. If it was that easy, I would have done it by now. General Artica frowned, the farther the puppets are from me, the weaker my control over them. This far away from the city, there's a good chance any puppeteer that comes across them could snatch them away from me. I can't take such risks. Now what? How can I convince her? Rigriel thought before getting an idea, why do we need to leave them here? We can bring them with us by layering them with a layer of wood. By keeping it coarse, it'll match with our attire. We can act like I'm the one controlling a wooden puppet. Let's leave the other 2 under a tree. This way, even if someone tries to take control of them, you'll know immediately and can use the iron puppet to arrive here swiftly. General Artica thought, once I have rested a little, I'll have enough energy to fight against any puppeteer that tries to steal my puppets. I'll be able to stall long enough to rush to the scene immediately. And, if I layer them with coarse wood as he said, I'll be able to bring one puppet with me. That's more than enough to deal with any threat in this small city. No sooner did she finish pondering did 2 iron puppets hold an armament in each hand, condensing a sword before slashing them, cutting a tree trunk into 2 pieces. They swiftly worked in carving a wooden mask using the armament swords, soon creating one to align on the face of the 3rd iron puppet. It was enough to make it look like a wooden puppet. They also created a wooden shoe so that the iron puppet's footstep sounds would also seem like it was made by a wooden object. As the rest of its body was covered, and since no one ever tried to inspect a puppet, she judged that it was enough. After uprooting a tree, they jumped into the hole, placing the tree atop it. As for the tree with the severed trunk, she made it look like the wind had broken it, causing its canopy to hide the tree under which the 2 iron puppets hid. As it seemed like it would snow a lot, not many would try to remove the broken tree, that too in an area without any paths frequented by travelers. Once it was done, the disguised iron puppet carried Rigriel as they soon reached the city gates. Rigriel showed an arrogant look like his usual self. And since he still wore his clothes as a prince, the guards thought he was some big shot, allowing him entry. Upon seeing General Artica in commoner clothes, they shuddered in her beauty, turning green in envy as they dared not trouble Rigriel. Rather, they tried to give him trouble even then, but when the puppet stomped on the snow-covered ground a little, the sound made them flinch, letting go of their thoughts. While they were proceeding about through the streets, General Artica noticed a group of thugs eyeing her lecherously from an alley. Rigriel put on an act while her puppet beat them, stealing their money once they were unconscious. After that, they reached an inn, booking a room. Once the puppet placed him on the bed, it creaked, looking on the verge of breaking. He didn't mind about that though, smiling excitedly when he heard the notification in his mind. Chapter 28. I'm even worse. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Let's get some sleep. We need to wake up early tomorrow and find a source of income. General Artica said as she closed her eyes, falling asleep immediately as she was exhausted. She had already traveled with her puppets from Ellipster, the capital city of Entropica Kingdom, and reached the border to execute Rigriel. After that, she traveled all the way from the border to Pekel City that was southwest to head further away from the influence of the Entropica Kingdom. She did that to ensure the Queen wouldn't be able to target them that easily. Right, why did I hate Rigriel for all these years? His only minus point is that he's fat. But even then, he has a charm of his own. Seriously, what was wrong with me before? This was the final thought that ran through her mind before she fell asleep. Rigriel slowly inched his hand towards her, having slept close to one another on the bed. Slumping his hand over her hip, he smiled in exhilaration when General Artica wrapped her arms around his hand, pulling it into her embrace. The warmth and the feeling of softness he felt caused him to feel like he was in heaven. Right, I shouldn't forget about that. He thought, quickly pulling up the system interface. Now, let's see what this reward does. Body Resurgence, Level 1. Burns the excess fat in the body and converts it into Darlac. System, how long would it take to burn all the excess fat in my body? Rigriel asked in his mind. Host, it would take 1 month to burn all the excess fat. Your affinity towards Darlac would improve as a result and host's reserve of Darlac would reach 100 units. 100 units. 100 units. Amazing. Rigriel was stunned before his face flushed red from excitement. Only veteran soldiers have such a massive amount of Darlac. And I can get that in a month. System, activate Body Resurgence. He bellowed mentally. Activating Body Resurgence, Level 1, Host, brace for the pain, wait. Rigriel screamed mentally when he suddenly noticed that he was unable to move his body or even utter a scream. It was like he had been paralyzed. His body was perfectly still while he was enveloped in a feeling of being burned by fire. System, stop. Stop. Stop it immediately. Regriel screamed internally at the top of his mind voice. But in reality, his body was perfectly still as General Artica slept while hugging his hand. Host, body resurgence, level 1, cannot be stopped at will. Every time it is activated, it will last for an hour. Fighting, damn it. Regriel screamed in pain mentally as he was burned by whatever was happening. Eventually, after what felt like an eternity, the pain vanished, now replaced with a gentle, cool sensation. It took him another hour before Regriel managed to gather his bearing, asking in his mind, "System, how long do I need to put up with this pain?" Replying to Host. Body resurgence, level 1, works by consuming the fat in your body to supplement its activation. So, you can keep it activated constantly for a month until the results are displayed. This pain for a month. Regriel thought, taking in a deep breath as numerous images flashed through his mind. The scene of him being bullied by the other princes and princesses since childhood, the scorn from the servants, the prostitutes that snickered at his inability to stand up for more than 3 seconds, and finally, the queen's poisonous words that tore at his fragile heart. As the images flashed in his mind one after another, rage filled his mind. The injustice he faced made him grit his teeth as he gazed at the sky, ceiling of the room, and bellowed, in his mind, even a dog when cornered would lash out. I'll no longer be bullied. If the heavens wish to make me suffer, I shall shatter it apart. Those that bullied me, I'll make you suffer a fate 1,000 times worse. He then felt the Darlac circulating in his body, noticing that he had slightly trimmed down, looking at General Artica as he thought, "You've been on my side at my worst. In the future, I'll protect you, Artica." With a face filled with resolve, he bellowed in his mind, "System, activate body resurgence." Ding! Within a week, Regriel has slimmed down considerably. He even began to train a bit from time to time. Though, it's mostly related to him sleeping with General Artica. Compass Carburetor frowned as he read the report. As for General Artica, she has been busy heading into the dungeon daily. She didn't display too much strength, only doing the bare minimum needed for them to live in better conditions. Judging by what she had displayed, it seems she plans to gradually show more and more of her strength. Other than that, there hasn't been any significant development. Compass Carburetor finished reading through the report, noticing that there was another letter attached at the end. Taking it out, he read as his expression collapsed, "In lieu of her betrayal, the Striker House has been imprisoned. Everything's because Regriel forced General Artica to betray the kingdom by enslaving her." He slammed his fist on the desk, "To screw up with a family like that, damn bastard. How are you so quick to do it even if you were given those powers by the system?" Just when he felt angry, a couple of images flashed in his mind, instantly acting like a bucket of cold water was poured on him. The memory was of a struggling peddler who barely made ends meet by selling bangles on the roadside. His family made those bangles in a cramped hut where smoke billowed and the darkness of the bangle forge caused their eyesight to deteriorate. But despite everything, they had worked hard to make bangles to sell and bring food to their plates. But due to the rush of obtaining the money-making system, Compass Carburetor had used the bargain skill to bargain the price of the already dirt-cheap bangles to below the cost price, forcing the family to go hungry for the entire day. Due to their hunger, the father of the household was unable to sell any bangles the next day while their family failed to create any more due to their deteriorating health and unbearable hunger. Soon, they starved to their deaths. And even after learning of this incident, Compass Carburetor clearly remembered the statement he had uttered back then, "The business world sure is vicious, BDNV, fuck." Compass Carburetor slammed his fist into the table, breaking it as his fists bled. Tears streamed out his eyes as he hit his head on the table. Who the hell am I to criticize someone else? I'm even worse. Chapter 29. The 10 Conditions. You are listening at novelfull.audio. I'm even worse. Compass Carburetor finally calmed down as he stared at the wall in silence for a good couple of hours, thinking of his choice of actions and what he had to do. At present, Regriel is a sh*TTY character. It won't be odd to say that he's someone who's better of being turned into manure for plants. But, I wasn't an honorable character either. As the money-making system upgraded my physique and mind, I became more mature and became a respectable character only when I was around 28 years old. Similarly, there is a good chance Regriel would redeem himself too in the future. Compass Carburetor sighed. He then frowned, but, what character am I planning to be from now onwards? No matter how deplorable a person is, as long as he's not a permanent edgelord, he's bound to mature and become a relatively respectable person in the future. After all, only when they reach such a point would a system judge that they no longer hold any value and return to the system world. And now, these system users are my target, those that can potentially become a system slayer in the future. His eyes glinted as his expression turned menacing, recalling the words uttered by the money-making system before it escaped to Earth. Stencil takes the #1 priority. No matter what, I have to save her. And, I should only take actions based on how it affects saving her, no more, no less. Chivalry, justice, empathy, and the likes, I should throw them out of my character now. He looked at the blood dripping from his fist. To save my daughter, I have to grow stronger first. And to do that, I need system fragments. And to obtain system fragments, he looked at the documents on the table before him. Regriel is my target. I should also search for other system users. Only then can I safely make a move on him. Compass Carburetor summoned a servant, telling her to write a couple of things, using his hurt hand as an excuse. Upon seeing the state of his hand, she was stunned, immediately telling the other servant to bring in a medicinal kit to heal his injuries. As one of the servants washed his wounds and applied a herbal solution to them, Compass Carburetor realized that the medical technology of the world hadn't been developed enough. If suppose a person lost a limb, then it was best to say that they would remain limbless for the rest of their lives. There is no healing energy of the sort here. Darlac only boosts one's stamina, nothing else. He nodded, then thinking according to his history, recalling Forth's advice to act based on his life experience as a system user. He then looked at the servant, telling her to write whatever he said. These are the key traits I am looking for in an individual. They have to be a relatively famous trash, a good-for-nothing. It's either that or they have to be a chivalrous pervert hailing from a dirt-poor family without any means to grow stronger. The second condition is that they must have either been betrayed once or must be humiliated almost daily for no reason whatsoever. And, the situation in both the cases should be that they must have some sort of relation to a rather young, almost their age, but powerful hero, either a childhood relationship or a past scenario where one of them ended up saving the other. The third condition is that their weakness or a lack of ability must be well known. But all of a sudden, almost overnight, they became super talented and had become the talk of the school/town, etc. The fourth condition is that they had a weak-willed character, but overnight, they became strong-willed enough that their willpower and determination is on par with the heroes of the generation. And, their change should be to the extent that they seem like an entirely different person. The fifth condition is that they haven't done anything significant yet, but for some reason, a really important figure showed an interest in them all of a sudden, either romantically or a teacher-student relationship with romantic sub-interests. The sixth condition is that no matter what they are wearing, the passer-by would always try to underestimate them or mock them for almost no reason. And, the mockers would usually be either face-slapped physically or figuratively. The seventh condition is that they are always at the center of numerous conflicts one after another, with almost no rest. The eighth condition is that even while standing at the middle of the street, eating at a corner of the restaurant, conversing with someone, or even taking a walk, their gazes would sometimes be distracted, as if they are talking with someone else, even if there is no one else around. The ninth condition is that they would be regarded to be immensely talented by numerous strong individuals with varying motives. But no matter what, for some reason, none of them had even noticed him or her before they had changed overnight mysteriously. The 10th condition is that no matter what, they never suffer a loss. Even if they suffer a loss, it would later give them greater gains. And they always have a mysterious air to them, also able to do stuff or wield abilities that are normally perceived as impossible by the masses. After saying out the 10 conditions, Compass Carburetor thought for a moment, the remaining are too small or discreet and would complicate the searching process. This should be enough to get a clue. He then said to the servant, bring me a list of people who showcased at least 6 conditions of this list. Bring me a detailed report on their activities and what they had achieved to date, including their history. Is this all? The servant asked, feeling her head spin at the details, wondering, just how will we search for such people? Yes, Compass Carburetor nodded, that will be all. And try to concentrate most of the search beyond this kingdom. Time isn't of the essence here, but the matter is of utmost importance. Inform everything I said to the queen. I'll do it now. The servant read through the 10 conditions once as she got up, bowed a little and exited the room. Chapter 30. Mental Energy. A system's eyes and ears. You are listening at novelfull.audio. This is. The Queen, Ephamela, frowned in shock as she read through the 10 conditions Compass Carburetor had listed. Normally, if someone read through them, they would think the other party had gone senile. But, as she was very well aware that Compass Carburetor was otherwise, she calmed down. And upon looking at it objectively, she discovered that Regriel matched 5 of the listed 10 conditions. Moreover, to verify the rest, she had to observe him carefully for a longer time. So, Ephamela was assured that Compass Carburetor knew of something way beyond her understanding. And, this something was capable of affecting her life the highest. And at the center of this wave was Regriel, the prince that she had banished from the kingdom. This is turning out to be a greater headache than what I had bargained for. Ephamela massaged her forehead, feeling that her skin may wrinkle soon at this rate. She thought things through, one way or another. Regriel is going to cause trouble for my kingdom soon enough. Based on the report, he has lost significant weight in the past few days and has also begun to train. And, based on how long he was able to maintain the armament activation, he already has around 20 Darlak. This is too fast to be kidding around, she muttered, for a moment feeling a sense of fear. She then closed her eyes, habitually synchronizing her vision to the puppet hidden with Compass Carburetor's room, looking at his appearance. For a moment, upon seeing that he was seated on the chair in all seriousness, having not trained for the past few hours, it was like smashing a rock on her heart. She could feel her heart accelerating as a sense of worry began to bud in her. Will he be able to do anything? Even though his growth has been exceptionally fast, it's nowhere enough to compare with Regriel. Seated in his room, Compass Carburetor was deep in thought, recalling information from the numerous system novels he had read about. Right, typically, quite a few system novels come equipped with the skill to appraise others. So, if Regriel casts his gaze on me, he might be able to see all my information. As his system is related to enslaving women, he should definitely have an appraisal ability. And, it has been a week. Even if he's oblivious to the scouts keeping watch on his actions, General Artika should have definitely felt something is fishy. She's touted to be the strongest general of this kingdom, so she should have considerable experience with such things. She would prove to be the strongest opponent against him for the time being. He thought, frowning as he scratched his chin. He sniffed the scent of the herbs used to patch his wound, thinking, any methods like poison wouldn't work on Regriel. Even the money-making system was capable of filtering out the poison. Any system is capable of weeding out all internal threats to a certain extent. Unless it is a poison of the highest caliber in this world, it wouldn't even put Regriel's life at risk. Any plans involving more people would cause too many variables. A system thrives off mental energy. That means, when I am around Regriel and am thinking of harming him, would it be able to sense my animosity? No, it's guaranteed to do so, since it would be drinking it excitedly. Indeed, that's how it's able to generate quests. Even at present, it might be receiving a lot of mental energy due to the scouts and the thoughts of everyone in this kingdom who are either worried about General Artika's betrayal or are mocking Regriel. He tapped on the table, wincing in pain for a moment. He had slammed his fists hard on the table, so he was feeling some pain. Thankfully though, the pain was slowly reducing. Health, level 10. Natural recovery, level 6. The two of them worked in conjunction, allowing him to heal from the injury at a faster pace than normal. Compass Carburetor frowned, deep in thought, mental energy. Unless I think of a way to avoid that, no matter what I do, Regreel system would sense me well in advance. I won't be able to rip off his body parts, much less kill him. He then thought of something, summoning his gun. He summoned it within his clothes so that it wouldn't be visible. It was just a layer of caution he exercised, just in case there was a monitoring device of this world that he hadn't known about. Though, judging based on the report from the scouts, he was assured that there was a mode of surveillance that was being employed here. So, he wished to be cautious. And after arriving in this world, this was the first time he summoned the gun. Once it formed, it began to suck in air through the nozzle, beginning to condense a bullet within it. Thankfully, this is a self-sufficient gun. Had I possessed a normal gun, it would have turned into a chunk of metal once the bullets run out, or I would have had to subsist with something else to keep it functional. The gun would be no different to a scrap metal then. As the gun continued to suck in the air, Compass Carburetor closed his eyes, focusing on its actions, synchronizing himself with it on a deeper level. As it was derived from the money-making system, it meant his gun should also have a system's basic ability to detect mental energy. While it was fused into his body, it must have been using his body to detect and absorb mental energy. That's why it needed a host in the first place. And now that he obtained all parts of its body related to the physique, he must have it in him too. Hours passed in such a fashion as Compass Carburetor meditated, focusing on the gun as he sensed the energy related to the system swirling within, noticing faint flickers of what seemed to be starlight. As he focused on the starlight, he was able to grasp faint emotions through it. And, there was a stream of starlight traversing towards him from a certain location in the wall.